to this first ever online annual session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. We are here about to start our opening ceremony. The NATO PA President has just joined us, and we have with us as well the head of the Greek delegation, Marietta Giannakou. Mr. President.
Yeah, could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
That's fine. Perfect. Do we have 1 minute? Okay, we have to somehow manage my camera. Just a second. Okay, okay, now I think everything is set. Could you hear me, Ruxandra?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So, shall we start? Could we start?
We can start whenever you want, Mr. President.
Okay, do we have here the participants also? Not just alone?
It looks like we have a very large number of participants here this afternoon.
That's great. So, well, I now declare open the 66th annual session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I would like to welcome you all to this first ever online session of our Assembly. Ministers, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, 2020 has been a year like no other before. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken the lives of too many citizens of our countries, ground to halt our economies and our societies, and forced us to reconsider essential elements of our way of life. The freedom of our movement, the freedom to meet with and see our loved ones, the freedom to eat out with friends, to go to movies or to the theater. All our countries are now in the middle of the second wave of this pandemic. We can finally see some light at the end of this tunnel, thanks to the remarkable speed of vaccine development. But we must deal with this pandemic for many more months, and its impact will be felt for many years. Friends and colleagues, this situation has meant that we have been unable to meet in person since March. However, from the beginning, I have been determined to ensure that we could continue to exchange, because none of our nations can address this crisis alone. Only together can we overcome it. And because the threats and challenges we faced before this pandemic have not gone away. To the contrary, since April, we have held some 30 online meetings on the broad range of challenges of our countries face. We had adapted our communications
and we seem to be breaking up the connection, so hopefully we can pick up the president again in a few moments. Just bear with us until we re-establish the connection, and apologies for this hiccup.
Does it work?
It now works, Mr. President. Yeah.
Thank you. This online annual session is a first for our Assembly. It will provide a unique opportunity for all of us to look back at a truly exceptional year and to look forward to our future priorities and challenges on the horizon. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank the Greek delegation for doing their very best up until the last minute to create the conditions to hold our session in Athens as planned. Unfortunately, this proved impossible. I'm glad, however, that we can exchange with several government ministers over the course of this session, including this afternoon. I also want to thank the delegations of Luxembourg and Ukraine, Both would have been gracious hosts for the Standing Committee and the spring session respectively. I'm glad we will soon again meet in Luxembourg City and Kiev. Starting this afternoon and over the next 5 days, we will review our responses to COVID-19 and the wide-range impact of the crisis on our societies, our economies, as well as on global and transatlantic security. Our committees have drawn up 6 excellent special reports on the different dimensions of this crisis. But we will also discuss the many security challenges we must continue to face. Russia's aggressive actions and ambitious military modernization, the ongoing threat of terrorism, instability in our neighborhood from the Black Sea to the Gulf, unfinished Euro-Atlantic integration of the Western Balkans, and the disruptive impact of emerging technologies. The challenges posed by China's rise and global ambitions feature prominently on our agenda. Last December, for the first time, NATO leaders decided we need to address China's growing influence and international policies together as an alliance. They called China an opportunity and a challenge. To be honest, I see it as more of a challenge than an opportunity. China has similar geopolitical ambitions than Russia, but a smarter and more effective approach. It uses tanks and banks. So without losing sight of the opportunities, we must better identify the direct challenges China's global ambitions and actions, as well as its cooperation with Russia, pose to NATO and the allies. And we must learn the lessons from the COVID-19 crisis in terms of China's disinformation and propaganda campaign, and the risks stemming from our dependence on China in some strategic sectors. I regret that Europe has not yet developed a common approach to Huawei's access to 5G infrastructure. In short, China must start acting as a responsible global player, but we can no longer afford to be naive about its ambitions and role. Over the course of our session, we will also have an opportunity to discuss NATO operations and particularly the situation in Afghanistan. Our nations went into Afghanistan together, and together with our Afghan friends, we have made enormous sacrifices since 2001 to lasting root out terrorism and bring peace and stability to Afghanistan. We should live together when we all agree time is right. And premature withdrawal risks encouraging international terrorist groups who want to cause harm to our alliance and might flock to Afghanistan to once again rebuild what they have lost. I'm reassured by the steadfast bipartisan US congressional support of NATO's mission in Afghanistan, which I see demonstrated every time I exchange with the US delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. So the list of challenges we face is long. And to address them, we must continue to invest in our defense and invest in innovation despite the dire economic impact of the pandemic. Otherwise, NATO risks losing its technological edge and unsurpassed military power. As importantly, we must ensure that our citizens understand the threats we face, understand why defense matters, and how NATO helps protect them. And on many of these challenges, we must work with partners, the European Union, of course, but also our expanding network of like-minded partners from Europe to Asia. I'm glad so many of them are joining us over the next few days. During this session, we will also adopt our contribution to the NATO 2030 reflection process. I will speak more about this on Monday when we welcome the NATO Secretary General. Throughout this year, it has been one of my main priorities to ensure the Assembly makes its voice heard in the discussion and helps shape a vision for NATO's future. We have engaged with the group of experts appointed by the Secretary General to support the process, and with the Secretary General and Deputy Secretary General themselves. On Monday, I will present a draft declaration with recommendations on 3 strands of work of NATO 2030. how to make NATO more united politically, keep it strong militarily, and develop a more global approach. All three are important, of course, but we can add particular value to the first strand. We are an eminently political organization, and we are therefore often better able to address issues frankly and openly without being bound by the constraints of governmental diplomacy. We also represent the diverse political spectrum in our countries and the diversity of our citizens. For these reasons, as the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, we must embody the shared values which form the foundation of our unique alliance. We must make sure it's not just a political military organization, but also an alliance of democracies. First, we must do all we can to preserve and strengthen the special bond uniting Europe and North America. I want to recognize and thank our colleagues from Canada and the United States for their unwavering commitment to NATO and to our Assembly, and for all they do to build support for the alliance in their parliaments and among their constituents. We all must continue to do the same in our own countries and play our part in ensuring that Europe pulls its full weight in support of shared security. Second, we must be true to our values and lead by example. Again, our Assembly is well placed to raise any concerns and address any differences between us. I will not hide, we have seen serious differences among some allies this year. I have done my utmost to provide a forum where these could be discussed openly. Only in dialogue we can make progress. Leading by example also means playing our part in supporting gender equality and mainstreaming. This year, we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the landmark United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. Our work throughout 2020 has been a useful reminder of how far we have gone, but also of how much we still have to do. The third, we must speak out when the values we stand for are trampled upon, even more so when this happens in our close neighborhood. This is why our Assembly has been vocal on Belarus, and we will continue to condemn the regime for as long as it seeks to suppress the free expression of its people's will. Fourth, we must do more to protect the rules-based international order against those who seek to undermine it. Russia regularly demonstrates its disregard for international law and, of course, continue to illegally occupy parts of Georgia and Ukraine's sovereign territory. But China too seeks to impose its own vision and values within existing institutions and through parallel institutions. Fifth, we must keep our door open to those who share our values and want to join our unique community of nations. I was truly honored to address the historic session of the Parliament of North Macedonia when they ratified the North Atlantic Treaty. But Skopje is not the end of the road. We must anchor the Western Balkans region firmly in our Euro-Atlantic and European community. Our indecision creates a vacuum others will happily fill. This is why last week's exchange with EU Commissioner Oliver Várhelyi and NATO Deputy Assistant Secretary General James Apaturai was so important for us. But we must also continue to support Georgia and Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic aspirations. Georgia is in the midst of a delicate election with the second round of parliamentary elections in just a few days. So I will refrain from commenting. I will just stress this. The NATO PA delegation traveled to Georgia to observe the first round of the election, making this our only in-person visit since March. This is clear evidence of our Assembly's commitment to support Georgia's democracy and Euro-Atlantic integration. Similarly, we must keep our door open to Ukraine. Countries must be free to decide their own fate without any third party holding a veto. My very first meeting after my nomination as a president was with our Ukrainian delegation in the framework of our Ukraine-NATO Interparliamentary Council. And after we had to cancel our spring session, we had a second meeting online, symbolically scheduled on the day we should have met in Kiev. Dear colleagues, throughout this pandemic, parliaments have continued to play their essential role safeguarding democratic values and freedoms at home. With this session, we demonstrate that no matter the setting, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly provides an essential forum for open and frank political dialogue on transatlantic security. Together, we remain committed to protecting our citizens and defending the values for which the NATO alliance stands. I look forward to seeing you online throughout the coming days. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you. And now I will ask Marietta, the head of the Greek delegation, to take the floor. Ruxandra, please help me. Yes, Marietta is here. Marietta, thank you very much for your time and effort and work in the last year to supporting our work, and you did everything with your colleagues and with your government to be able to organize this meeting, but the virus was stronger than us. So now we have this online session, but I wanted to thank you again. So the floor is yours, please tell your kind words to us.
We seem to be having an issue with the microphone. Mrs. Yanakou, we seem to be having an issue with the microphone, so we don't hear Marietta. Sorry. Yeah, we don't hear you, Marietta. Apologies again for the technical issue. We're trying to solve this. Okay, I think it seems to be working now.
Alors, je recommence. Je recommence.
Let me start again then. Mr. President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Mr. Prime Minister of the Greek Republic, Mr. Minister of the Environment and Energy of the Greek Republic, dear colleagues, in the name of the Greek delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, let me welcome colleagues of all NATO parliaments. I would like to welcome you to this online session. And now allow me to switch to my native language.
Parliaments are the cornerstone of contemporary representative systems. They offer legitimacy to governments domestically and internationally. The Parliamentary Assembly of NATO gives the possibility to members to discuss, to debate, and influence decisions concerning the defense and the security of the alliance. At the same time, the Assembly allows us to work all together to strengthen and promote Euro-Atlantic relations. Thanks to parliamentary diplomacy implemented by the Assembly, the values of democracy, of partnership, of solidarity, and cooperation within NATO come out stronger and are disseminated worldwide. In the next few days, we will have the opportunity to exchange views, to debate, to submit and explore ideas, and to discuss priorities for the next decade. In other words, for 2030. The renewed Euro-Atlantic partnership is therefore of the highest importance in this respect. Dear colleagues, since NATO's inception, NATO members forged strong ties based on respect for liberal democracy, rule of law, and commitment to peace. For this to pursue, we need to meet three important conditions. First, we need an adequate reckoning with current and future challenges. Second, NATO must strengthen its social legitimacy. Third, solidarity, a cornerstone. This is where the unity of the alliance will be put to the test. In a constantly changing world, the main mission of NATO, that is maintain peace and prevent aggression, continues to be topical. However, a condition for us to continue to be secure and successful is to address the exacerbated rivalry for power, united and in a coordinated way, giving priority to our solid commitment for rule of law and mutual respect for national sovereignty in terms of security. So with these words, allow me to welcome the Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic, whose message was pre-recorded, given that he's in an official visit planned before long at the United Arab Emirates. The government will be represented by the Minister for Environment and Energy, Mr. Kostis Hatzidakis, who will reply to questions right after the Prime Minister's speech. Thank you, dear colleagues, and thank you, President.
Very well, welcome to the Minister. And Mr. President, we will now show the video. Should start any time now. Participants, we are fixing technical issues so we can get the sound on the Prime Minister's video. Apologies for this. The video will restart as soon as we fix the issue with the sound. So if you couldn't hear the Prime Minister, that's a problem on our side. So we're trying to fix that.
President Mesterhazy, Secretary General Stoltenberg, distinguished Vice Presidents, fellow parliamentarians, I would like to offer you a warm virtual welcome to Athens and the 66th annual session of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I'm sorry we cannot be together in person in the city where many of the ideals that underpin modern democracy were born some 2,500 years ago. The pandemic may have separated us physically, but innovation at least means that we can still be together as we embark on 5 days of crucial work in support of NATO. For the last 65 years, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has been critical to the strengthening of our Atlantic alliance. I myself was a member of the Assembly for 8 years and can attest to its importance. Over the past decades, NATO's role and the role of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has adapted and evolved to the demands and challenges of an ever-changing world. In addressing the post-Cold War security threats and challenges, NATO's flexibility, that willingness to respond and reset, has been our greatest asset as an alliance. While old threats still persist, today they commingle with new threat vectors, shifting, blending, and mixing. The new risks we face are compounding at speed. Regional power plays, the ever-present risk of terrorism, the ghostly hand of hostile state actors in the gray zone, sitting behind cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and activating proxies to chip away at our democracies. And of course, in this year, biological risks. A global pandemic, the like of which the world has not seen for 100 years, disrupting our societies, our economies, our way of life. Who could have imagined that we would be announcing curfews, shutting economies, preventing the movement of people? So it is in that global context that we meet this week. And it is why I believe NATO's mission and your work supporting that mission has never been more important than it is today. Greece has been a member of this alliance since 1952. We joined 3 years after NATO's founding and just 7 years after the defeat of Nazi Germany. For decades, NATO membership has sat alongside a secure framework for constitutional government. Being part of the institutional framework of the West has helped too, active members not just of NATO, but of the United Nations and the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, NATO has done a huge amount beyond our borders in the last 25 years. In the Balkans, in Afghanistan, in training support in Iraq. But today the threat is more complex, more nuanced, and more evolving. Our modern challenges concern conflict, poverty, power vacuums, and lawlessness. Challenges that have led to the rise of terrorism and mass migration. Greece has been at the forefront of that movement of people, with hundreds of thousands of refugees and migrants arriving from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and sub-Saharan Africa. Our rivals and on our borders, our communities, and our local services. A 21st century NATO is vital to our ability to defend against every one of these new threats and challenges. So what would a new NATO look like? The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us the value of expertise, cooperation, information, and intelligence sharing. And it has highlighted the importance of investment in emerging technologies. The lesson for NATO is that our partnerships must be similarly open and adaptable. We must work with those who share the alliance's values and can help address evolving security challenges outside NATO's borders. That means increased cooperation with countries such as India to address security challenges in Asia. And on NATO's southern flank, where conflicts in Syria and Libya continue to threaten instability, we must seize on new partnerships and increase cooperation with partners in Africa, the Middle East, and the Gulf. All of us here today are part of a transatlantic family. We gain strength from the unity of our values and from the security of our shared defense guarantee. That guarantee should be underpinned by the genuine commitment of all our member states. Allies cannot afford to disregard the geopolitical implications of their policies and actions, in particular when these have a direct effect on the alliance's overall security and cohesion. Allies cannot cooperate with jihadist groups, nor can they deploy S-400 missiles. Such practices undermine NATO's values and reduce its solidarity, cohesion, unity, and effectiveness as a political military organization, and they are at odds with the objectives of the alliance itself and its defense interests. When it comes to Russia and China, we should remain open to the prospect of meaningful dialogue, but also continue to engage in collective defense and security. That is why I warmly welcome President-elect Biden's commitment to the alliance and to European security. NATO's success is born of collective solidarity. Our alliance not only enhances America's power, it also ensures Europe's defense. As Prime Minister, I am proud that Greece not only meets but exceeds its commitment to spend 2% of its GDP on defense annually. We have made significant new investment commitments this year in military equipment, strengthening our strategic capability and participating in key NATO operations and missions. Greece sits at the apex of the Eastern Mediterranean and North Africa. We're at the forefront of efforts to promote peace and security, democracy, multilateral dialogue, and regional cooperation. It's a region of huge strategic importance to NATO and, of course, to the European Union. While being a security provider, Greece itself has been facing security challenges which undermine NATO's unity. In 2020, that unity has been severely tested due to Turkey's provocations and unilateral actions. In March, we were faced with the weaponization of migratory flows. In the summer, we had to set our armed forces on high alert because of actions against our sovereignty and sovereign rights over our seas. Eventually, two allied naval forces were facing each other for 35 days, a situation endangering our security and the stability of NATO's southern flank. Throughout, I have urged President Erdogan to look outward towards the EU and the West, to engage and to solve our differences in the spirit of collaboration. As I've said on many occasions this year, Greece and Turkey must talk, and if we cannot agree, then we must settle our disputes at the International Court and let the rule of law prevail. We are sincerely committed to good faith dialogue. We have been patiently waiting for reciprocity. However, if our calls remain unanswered, it will become inevitable for the European Union to take measures to protect its strategic interests and those of its member states. Ladies and gentlemen, above all, I am a parliamentarian and a Democrat. Democracy only flourishes when there is security between states. The great historian and author Thucydides wrote the definitive history of how Athenian democracy was overthrown by great power rivalry. As we gather here this week, can we really be confident that a modern-day Thucydides might not one day tell a similar story about the decline of 21st century democracy? If we are to ensure that this doesn't happen, if we are to ensure the continuity of our democratic system, then it is clear that the vital institutional pillar, NATO, remains firm, essential as it is to the collective security of both Europe and North America. Protecting our shared interests, assuring stability across our shared geographies, and guaranteeing peace between the world's great powers for a decade to come. Thank you for your attention. On behalf of the Greek people, I wish you well in the days ahead. President.
Thank you very much, Marietta.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to turn now to the Minister for the Environment and Energy, Mr. Kostis Hatzidakis, and a great friend of mine. With his experience as an ex-member of the European Parliament and being a minister to many governmental portfolios, as well, I could not think for a better person to join our online meeting today. Kostis, we are very honored that you are here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Marietta, I'm honored as well. President, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real honor for me to represent the Greek government in today's virtual meeting. I welcome you, not to Athens, unfortunately, but to this virtual meeting, and I hope that we'll see you all in Athens in the near future. I don't have anything specific to add to what the Prime Minister just said. The Prime Minister transmitted the message of the Greek government, the way we see things, to you all. I would like to add that I've never been personally a member of your parliamentary assembly, but as Marietta just said, I've been a member of the European Parliament for many years, so I'm used a little bit to the international politics. And that's why I suppose I was selected to represent the government in this virtual meeting. And of course, having said that, I'm at your disposal to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hatzidakis. And now I would like to open the floor for the Q&A session. I will ask Ruxandra's assistants who is in the row. Yeah, I think Mr. Asgarov. He's the first one. So Ruxandra, please put him on the screen. Yes, it's okay. Ms. Asgarov, you have the floor. You have the floor.
So the sound is not working.
Ms. Asgarov, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think the problem is on, it seems fine on our side. So it looks like there, if you would like maybe to kick another member, perhaps.
Yeah, that's what I wanted, and perhaps
yeah,
during that time you can talk to him. Yildiz, Mr.
That question, I don't have any answer to this question.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Greet Prime Minister and the Minister of Environment from Ankara as Komşuya. Mr. Minister, it is a pity that Turkish-Greek disputes occupy NATO, NATO-PA, and Council of Europe forums very much in the absence of a serious bilateral negotiation process. Unfortunately, exploratory talks was stopped by Greece without any explanation a few years ago, and Greek Cypriot drilling and search unilaterally in the Eastern Mediterranean triggered the escalation. It seems that the trust and confidence is eroded very much between the two sides, but these problems pass from one generation to the other, next generations. The key is the bilateral serious negotiations. It seems that internationalization of the issues did backfire. It didn't help anything. Is Greece ready to start the negotiations as President Erdogan proposed without any preconditions? Or, for example, could you think that to make a step to restore the confidence, for example, by denouncing this Sevilla map, which was one of the factors triggered this escalation, or any other confidence building measure? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Yeah, dear colleague, dear Yildiz, Greece is committed to peace and stability in the region, and that applies even more as regards Turkey. We are always in favor of this approach. And as the Prime Minister said, we're ready to discuss our bilateral issues, which are the delimitation of the exclusive economic zone, as we did with Egypt and Italy. There are recent examples regarding this issue. So delimitation of exclusive economic zones and territorial self, according to the international law principles. And if we achieve to reach a solution as regards these issues, that's fine. Otherwise, as Mr. Mitsotakis, the Prime Minister, just underlined, there is the alternative of the International Court of Justice. And this is the case between, this is what is happening actually now between Greece and Albania as regards the same issues. So in practice, what we propose to Turkey is what already happened between Greece and Egypt, Greece and Italy, Greece and Albania. It is so simple. And we also underline that as soon as Turkey stops provocative actions in the Aegean and Southeast Mediterranean, we are ready to start discussions. And that was the case in the past. We are the same country, we have the same approach. And provided that Turkey will practically commit to avoid tensions, the establishment of confidence-building measures, such as the direct line of communications between the two heads of the general staff of the two countries, could prove useful in avoiding the possibility of an accidental clash, which could spiral into an open conflict. And that would be a significant contribution of NATO. And that's why I mentioned this, I refer to this dimension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we have Philippe Michael Kleisbauer from France.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you, President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. First, dear Minister, please thank the Prime Minister for his welcoming words and tell him in the name of France and in the name of all of our colleagues that we all very much love Greece, especially for all the cultural heritage it has left us with. And Greece will also, for a very long time, be allowed to live off its copyrights because we owe it so much from a cultural point of view. So my question is addressed to you as Minister of Environment and Energy of the Hellenic Republic. As of now, we have to anticipate the changes of climate change. This is an obligation we have. There are pressures on natural resources, there are issues around food safety, and therefore missions of prevention and protection that are led by the armed forces should be multiplied. NATO, via its Center of Excellency for Energy Security, is also trying to deepen its considerations on this point, but also very pragmatically, it's looking at the energy transition of its armies. France has just transformed its services in an operational service, and it's going in that same direction. Therefore, this strategic foresight implies a cooperation, enhanced cooperation. It's true from a global standpoint. And how in 2021 can we bring together all players, and especially the main players and the emerging players, in order to have a common fund, in order to face these challenges? And how can we take into account the energy constraints that were born out of the Paris Agreement? It's also true at the regional level, for instance, at the Mediterranean level,
there is a dialogue and negotiation rising between the north and the southern banks in order to find creative solutions while respecting international law. This is to manage common goods and manage common issues, for instance, the access to natural resources and their management. Here I have in mind the blue economy, a sustainable development practice. Therefore, how can we make sure that the energy stakes in the Mediterranean can be used as a leverage, just as we see with Egypt, Israel, and another country who are 3 partners of NATO? On all of these points, we would like to have your analysis, Mr. Minister. Thank you. Dear colleague, thank you very much for your question. And thank you for your kind words concerning Greece and the Greeks. I very much appreciate your words. I will now switch back to English, since you have raised a number of questions and it will be easier for me to answer in English.
Has adopted, in this government particularly, a very ambitious climate policy agenda, and we are strongly committed to the targets of the Paris Agreement and the European Union's goal of climate neutrality by 2050. Greece's focus on achieving a green transition is clearly demonstrated by our commitment to shut down all lignite power plants until 2028 at the latest, and this commitment is combined with an extended investment plan to guarantee a social and economic just transition for the regions affected by this change. We are also making significant efforts to maximize the use of the next generation EU funds in order to fast-track large-scale investments in and initiatives related to renewable energy penetration, energy efficiency, and electrical mobility. In this respect, I have to tell you that we are in contact with the Ministry of Defense in order for the Greek army to participate in this new policy adopted for the government, because army cannot be considered in isolation as regards our environmental policy. Of course, we do not stop here. We are also pursuing significant urban regeneration projects that will promote, for example, biking and walking in a further attempt to make our cities more sustainable and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we are currently putting in place the largest reforestation plan ever implemented in our country. By coincidence, we have a meeting with the Prime Minister to discuss this issue next Friday. Now, I turn to your question concerning the blue economy. If you take a quick look at a map, you can immediately understand how important the blue economy is for Greece. It is more than obvious, I think. Therefore, in order to shift towards a model of sustainable growth, it is necessary to shift towards a model of sustainable blue growth, which protects our natural resources. This includes promoting, for example, green energy and electrical mobility, especially in the islands, to protect environment, which is our wealth in Greece. A blue growth model also includes promoting innovative energy solutions such as tidal energy, which is something which I'm sure touches you because of the Atlantic and so on. Another innovative solutions to bat climate change include green ports which will help reduce carbon emissions by providing electricity to ships, the so-called cold ironing. These are all fields in which we have seen significant investments interest in recent months. And finally, in this context, we have to adopt a strategy promoting a sustainable tourism model. All these are areas in which it is not enough to act in isolation. This is why we welcome cooperation within the European Union and in the framework of the Euro-Mediterranean partnership. Of course, we have to cooperate with your country, with other EU member states, and also with the African and Asian countries, which are Mediterranean countries. The Mediterranean is our common home, and we must protect it together.
Thank you very much. And now the next one, Berat Konka from Turkey. Berat.
Hello, Mr. President, Secretary General, Mr. Minister. I also would like to wish a successful annual session. It is a little unfortunate that the Greek Prime Minister made some false accusations against a very important fellow NATO member country. I hope this annual session becomes an opportunity for better understanding each other in some issues that we differ. I also think that the issues that is mentioned shouldn't be internationalized. There are issues that should be dealt with bilateral talks. And I also think that the mentioning of sanctions is very counterproductive within NATO membership. These kind of approaches can create really unwanted consequences and cracks within the alliance, and which is not good for our solidarity and cohesion and indivisibility of our security. So I think that we need to refrain from this kind of remarks. And I would like to say that regarding the energy, it's a field of cooperation, and we are always in favor of a dialogue in this field. Therefore, we expect other countries in our region to positively respond to our calls for cooperation in the field of energy. On the other hand, I would like to make sure that we are determined to defend our sovereign rights and interests in Eastern Mediterranean, as well as the rights and the interests of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Our activities within Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus's licensed areas, as well as Turkey's continental shelf, will continue with seismic and drilling operations. These are not provocations, they are Turkey's sovereign rights, and I believe our Greek friends and neighbors can understand this, and if we can come to agreement, that's going to be good for both of our countries, for the region, for prosperity, for security. So I think that we need to look at these issues from fairness and justice in our minds. If we can approach in this respect, I think that Turkey and Greece can easily come over these issues, and NATO alliance becomes stronger and more effective when we issues. So I hope we can further our ground in this respect. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister, the Greek Prime Minister, Mr. Mitsotakis, transmitted his message. I firmly believe that Mr. Mitsotakis' message relies on facts. you have your own approach. And in this democratic forum, you have the possibility, of course, to transmit your own messages. What is important is to keep the message of cooperation at the end of the day, the message of dialogue. And given that you repeatedly said that you are in favor of having a dialogue with Greece, I think it is not very difficult. Turkey must stop the provocation. We can create a better climate with confidence building measures, and then we can discuss with our neighbors. We don't forget that we are condemned to coexist. And if we overcome this tension, that will be a win-win situation. So we can create a new climate. You can contribute to that by stopping provocations. We can discuss immediately afterwards. And as I said before, this is not the first time we discuss over the last decades. And if we don't reach an agreement, we can use the services of the International Court. Once again, I underline, we reached a common denominator, a solution with Egypt, with Italy as well, and we are trying to reach an agreement with the Albanians through the decision of the International Court of Justice. This is the way, in our view, for Greece and Turkey. And I wonder why you don't accept this approach, which is a common sense approach. And more or less the same applies to Cyprus. Cyprus and President Anastasiadis is always committed to international law, to the resolutions of the UN for a just and viable and comprehensive solution in Cyprus. And as regards the hydrocarbon explorations, he said that, of course, Cyprus is at the disposal of the international community for constructive talks in order to settle the Cyprus problem. And before settling this problem, Mr. Anastasiadis proposed to create an escrow account which will be at the disposal of the Turkish Cypriots as regards possible benefits from the hydrocarbon exploration in Cyprus. I think the situation is rather simple, provided that we both will follow a common sense approach. This is what we believe.
And now, Joël from France.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for giving me the floor. So first, I would like to thank the Greek Prime Minister, our former colleague at NATO. We remember him very well. He was very welcoming. And even though here it's virtual, we still feel that we are somehow in Greece, this country that has so warmly welcomed us for various seminars in the past. So I've been listening to this debates, including the reactions of our Turkish friends. And I feel that our pride as a NATO parliamentarian is about being able to debate We need to debate sensitive topics because there are tensions sometimes between NATO member countries. However, it always has to be done in the spirit of dialogue, of respect, of trying to seek consensus. And I am convinced that we will be able to do this during this session. There are many challenges ahead of us, important challenges. I'm thinking of our fight in the Sahel countries. As you know, France is very much involved in fighting terrorism and jihadism in this area, and we have to be united. And Mr. Minister, you were a MEP, and therefore I would like to ask you, what is the Greek government's position on the idea of Europeans' autonomous strategy in parallel with NATO or alongside NATO's actions? I just wanted to know what the position of your government was on that point.
La coopération et la coexistence de l'OTAN.
You want to know about the cooperation and coexistence between NATO and the European Union. Is that correct? Yes, I believe it is of the utmost importance to strengthen the connection between the European members of NATO, working hand in hand with NATO, obviously, but also to strengthen our own independent defense. I believe it is essential for our future and for capability development. So that's what I wanted your take on. Crystal clear. Thank you.
Autonomous European Union's defense capability is nothing new in the transatlantic debate. It has been there in one form or another in earnest at least since 1998. It is enshrined in all EU treaties, at least since 2003, and it has been recently upgraded by the activation of the so-called PESCO, the Permanent Structured Cooperation, in 2017, through the setting of common standards for cooperation and some financial support for R&D optimization and of new defense systems. Throughout this process, NATO's political and operational capabilities have been enhanced, no weakened, and if they were weakened, this did not happen as a result of enhanced defense cooperation among the EU members, who are also members of the Atlantic Alliance. The word of the game is complementarity. I think that the two efforts can proceed in parallel. NATO must be adapted to the modern needs. Mr. Mitsotakis referred to these needs, the new era, very clearly. And on the other hand, the European Union, the members of the European Union, which want to cooperate very closely in the field of defense, can do so. But I mean, the two efforts can be combined, in our view and in the view of our government, certainly.
Thank you very much. And now we have our two last questions. So we grouped the two because both from the Turkish delegation. First, Camille, if I'm right. Yeah. Ruxanda will help me. And I cannot see the second one. Yeah.
Yeah, we have Mr. Aydin on the screen already, so maybe we can start with him.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Thank you, Attila. Thank you, Ruxana. I would like to start with my good wishes to all my colleagues to come together again. And I would like to say something. And then finally, I'm going to ask a question, a very simple question to the minister. You know, in accordance with what the Prime Minister said, we heard that besides some other regional as well as global issues such as pandemics, it's good to hear from Prime Minister referring to mass migration. You know, in accordance with the reports of the UN authorities, drawing our attention to the uncontrollable replacement of population and migration all around the world, simply because of economic as well as terrorist reasons, you know, security reasons. And now Greece is having a similar problem. But as a transit country, Turkey, honestly, is paying the biggest price for this issue. Why? Because we are a transit country anyway. And on the other hand, in the neighboring countries, we are having problems. And dear Prime Minister mentioned about the problematic area, naming Syria, Iraq, and Libya, and so on and so forth. But, you know, then we found 4 million refugees within the country. And we share our bread so far and giving any harm to them. But on the other hand, in accordance with some international news agencies, you know, we hear that, of course, all the world is commonly concerned with the continuous pushbacks of asylum seekers, arbitrary detention, ill treatment, and inhuman living conditions of asylum seekers and refugees in Greece. Would you correct them? What do you think about this kind of international, you know, accusations, dear Minister? I would like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Sindir.
Sorry, your microphone is not turned on. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. We still don't hear you. No, unfortunately not. Oh, no, still not. Yeah. Mr. President, should we ask maybe the minister to answer the first question and we see we can
Yeah, of course, and then perhaps they can fix the problem. Minister, the floor is yours, please.
As you know, Greece has been seriously affected by the migration flows over the last years. It continues to be affected. That's why we asked for the solidarity of our partners in Brussels. And we are fighting to handle all this problem, trying to strike a right balance between the control of our borders and a humanitarian approach. And this is what we continue to do in cooperation with the European Union and the United Nations, and under the supervision, I would say, the surveillance of all relevant authorities, complying with the international law. And I think that I give this answer because I had a rather provocative question. This is not the case in Turkey, where there are many violations of human rights, including, of course, immigrants. But of course, I cannot resist to the temptation to add that those asking the questions were those which tolerated, if not provoked, thousands of immigrants who tried to cross the Greek borders in the north, in the river Evros last March. We resisted, of course, this effort, but there has been extensive coverage by the international media, and that's why the Prime Minister said that Turkey tried to weaponize migrant flows some months ago, which was not, of course, a very friendly action towards Greece.
Thank you very much. And now I think Mr. Sindir has voice. Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Please.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the minister for telling us their views. My colleagues actually have both mentioned our approach and national interests on our sovereignty and conflicts between the two countries. We have always been open to dialogue, but I wish I could also say this for Greece because of the provocations that we believe continue, including irregular violations of the demilitarized status of Eastern Aegean islands and military exercises in the Eastern Mediterranean. My actually before question, I'd like to mention that besides and apart from all these Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean issues and Cyprus issues, would you support also strengthening bilateral, social and cultural relations between the two communities, Greek and Turkish communities, which has a history of hundreds of years and which has close friendship and neighboring, so that to establish and help create a better understanding and a permanent peace between the two countries. I wish I could have heard friendly voices rather than emphasizing conflicts between the two countries. As a member of parliament of Turkish Republic, which also ancestors, my grandparents come from the Drama, a city of Greece now, I don't think we need any other countries, even our allied countries, nor any international communities, in particular the EU, to solve these conflicts. We can solve it by negotiating and with friendly negotiations between the two countries, and also by protecting our sovereignty rights for both countries. I also would like to hear environmental issues, especially within the Aegean Sea region, that must be put on the table to deal with between the two countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I would like to add the last question from Lord Campbell, and he is the last in the row. So, Ming, if you are with us here, yeah, I see you on screen. Yeah, it's perfect.
I hesitate to join in this debate, not least because I both respect and have great affection for both Greece and Turkey. And in no particular order, I remember that Turkey guarded the southern flank throughout the course of the Cold War, when the possibility of Russian incursion into Western Europe and Southern Europe was a real possibility. And so far as Greece is concerned, I studied classical Greek from school and university, and if pressed, can probably still rehearse the first lines of Homer's Odyssey. But the point I really want to make 2 points. The first is this: remember that Greece and Turkey and all the other members of this alliance have accepted the obligation contained in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, namely that an attack on one is to be treated as an attack on all. And the second point, division among the members of NATO, the most successful defensive alliance in history, is what our opponents prefer, and what in the case of Mr. Putin is one of his most publicly stated objectives. I just ask all those who have taken part in what I think has been a very well-mannered debate, if I may put it that way, if they would give consideration to these two factors that I've identified and judge the extent to which they might influence any progress or the opportunity for progress sometime in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I haven't tell you the truth. We have another person who would like to ask a question, Mr. Jerry Connolly, who is the head of the American delegation. So he will be the last one. Jerry, please, the floor is yours.
We have accepted Mr. Connolly on screen. There's just a little bit of a delay, but he should be coming on screen hopefully very soon. Okay, yeah, coming up now. Let's see if we could get him. Yeah. Wait. Okay. Let's see if Mr. Connolly.
I think then let's give the floor to the minister, and you can answer, and we will see Jerry could arrive. Yeah, please, Minister.
I'll try to give one single answer for the two previous questions. I'm not going to respond to the provocations, the so-called provocations of Greece towards Turkey, because in my view, this is a joke. But anyway, I would like to keep, given that we close, I would like to keep a spirit of optimism. And I would like to repeat and underline that given that we recently had, Greece had an agreement both with Italy and Egypt concerning the delimitation, demarcation of the exclusive economic zone. Given that in the case of Albania, we decided to go together, to settle together our differences in the international court. This is the way for Turkey and Greece. Exclusive economic zone, territorial self, we can settle our differences and we can coexist peacefully. This is a win-win situation. This is the way ahead. This is Europe. This is the modern world. This is what we have done with all the other neighbors of Greece. We coexist peacefully either in the framework of the European Union or in the framework of NATO, and we can do it with the Turks, provided that the Turks will adopt the mentality all the other neighbors of Greece have adopted. It takes two to tango. We are at the disposal of our neighbors, provided that they meet the preconditions I refer to, which are preconditions of common sense. This is our approach. Thank you very much. I like very much this extremely interesting dialogue.
Thank you very much. And I'm asking Marietta, does she want some kind of closing remark?
Ναι. Attila.
Yes, Attila, I wanted to say that our assembly, of course, does not solely concern Greek-Turkish relations. Well, Greek-Turkish relations are part of our scope. Lord Campbell mentioned Article 5, indeed. Now, the only way to resolve differences, to settle disputes in parliamentary democracy, is dialogue and avoiding provocations. And, well, this is all I would have to say at this point. There's no reason to continue dealing with this issue. There are so many other issues that we have to discuss. We, Greece, as the minister stressed, are ready to discuss the disputes that can be resolved through dialogue. Otherwise, the International Court of Justice is waiting for us. It's really clear to me things are not so difficult as some would like to believe. Well, by the way, our Turkish colleagues mentioned Cyprus. Cyprus is a European country, is an EU country, and Turkey maintains occupation troops on the territory of an EU state, period. I mean, well, it boils down to this at the end of the day. Thank you.
Marietta, and thank you very much, Mr. Hatzidakis, for your answers and time. And now we are closing the opening ceremony, but I would like to encourage you to stay connected, because our next program will be a special meeting on the COVID-19 pandemic, including the presentation of the Assembly special reports. So it could be interesting also. We have some small pause and then we go on with our online session. Thank you very much for your time and patience, and of course the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just for all participants, we will be restarting in 10 minutes.